Morning, everyone. All right, let's take our hymn books. We're going to turn to page 694. Let's stand as we sing page 694, I Gave My Life for Thee. I gave my life for thee, my precious blood I shed, that thou mightst ransom me and quicken from the dead. I gave my life for thee, what hast thou given for me? I gave my life for thee, what hast thou given for me? My Father's house above, my glory circled throne, I left for earthly now, for wandering sad and lone. I left it all for thee, as thou left all for me. I left it all for thee, as thou left all for me. I suffered much for thee, my can tell, a bitterest agony to rescue thee from hell. Born I born it all for thee, what hast thou borne for me? I born it all for thee, what hast thou borne for me? And I have brought to thee, down from my home above, salvation full and free, my pardon and my love. I bring rich gifts to thee, what hast thou brought to me? I bring rich gifts to thee, what hast thou brought to me? All right. Brother Sam Miller, would you please open us in prayer?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful morning that you've given us, and thank you for the opportunity we have to come to church and to hear your word preached. And Lord, I pray that you would be with us today in all that we do. And I pray for those people that are sick. I pray that you would restore them and bring them back to us. Lord, I pray that you would bless this offering that we're about to take and use it for the gospel. I pray this in Jesus' name.
Amen. You may be seated. He has caught this bug that's been attacking everybody. And we need to keep him and others in prayer. No, Pastor yesterday was not feeling too great, so keep him in prayer as he has much work to do today. So do pray for that. So Jason asked me on Friday if I'd be willing to cover him if he needed me to, and I was like, yeah, sure. And I thought, well, what am I going to teach on? He's been doing, kind of this cultural, historical look at the Jews. So I asked him, I said, so are you going to talk anything about the 400 silent years? And he said, a little bit. And I said, well, be a little more specific. And so he told me what he's going to teach, and I thought, well, this would fit perfectly. So I apologize in advance. We're going to have lots of names being flown around. So if you lose track of who is who, I can try and help explain. We are going to talk about a man named Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus Epiphanes. That's everybody pronounces it different. So this man, if you don't know who he is, you'll recognize at least the story about him. We're going to turn to Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8. This man is probably one of the most hated people by the Jews. And there is actually an event that they celebrate, well, I shouldn't say celebrate, they memorialize because of the things that this man did. Daniel chapter 8, and we'll start reading in verse 6. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. This is talking about the goat, and we'll talk about who that is. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself, even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prophesied. All right, so we have this prophecy that has to do with this man, but also it has to do with the Antichrist. So we're going to, depending on how quickly I can move through this, we're going to get through all of it today. It's quite a bit. But let's start by prayer, and then we'll continue. Dear Lord, I thank you for the day. I pray that you would just help us as we study this, Lord, and help us to remember that your word is always true, that if you say it's going to happen, we know that it will happen. And I think that's the bottom line of what we learn here, is that your word prophesies that these things will come to pass. And just as the events happened in history now, the events will happen again in the future as well, Lord. I pray that you would just bless now as we study your word. In your name, amen. All right, so let's talk a little bit about a general history, kind of as introduction, so that we understand where all these events happen in history. So we remember Nebuchadnezzar, right? He comes in and he destroys the temple, destroys Jerusalem in the year 586, and he takes the children of Israel captive. All right, so Daniel, we follow the life of Daniel at that point, and he goes over to Babylon, where he's subjugated. We learn about the other 3 Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the events that happen with them. We remember the story of Belshazzar, right, where he is drunk in his party, and he sees the handwriting on the wall, and that ushers in the Persian Empire, who come and take over Babylon, and then the Persia is now the world power where Babylon once stood. And so the Persians, we read of several kings that Daniel works with directly. One of them threw him into the lion's den, right? So yesterday we had our quizzing, not quizzing, one of the games that we played with the teenagers was Bible trivia. One of the boys was confident that Nebuchadnezzar threw Daniel in the lion's den. I'm like, no, please don't say Nebuchadnezzar. It was Nebuchadnezzar. Sorry, it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar, it was Darius. All right, so Darius threw him into the lion's den, and after the events of the Persian Empire pass, we see the Greek Empire coming through, the Macedonian Empire, being led by a man named Alexander the Great. All right, we know him from history, and that's what this is talking about. The he-goat, the Bible that the Bible is talking about here, is Alexander the Great. He comes through, he attacks the ram, which is Persia, and then he conquers the ram, but then shortly after, he's divided into four. What happens is Alexander dies, and his empire is divided four ways by his four major generals, who spend quite a while warring with each other, hundreds of years. And one of those smaller empires is the Seleucid Empire. All right, and the Seleucid Empire is the empire that we're going to focus on, because they're the ones that that's the empire that this man ends up ruling over quite a few years later after the events of Daniel, probably about 400 years or so. So that kind of gets us to where we're at. The Seleucids around 190. Yes, sir. Oh. We'll get to that. That's why you missed it. Yeah. We'll get to what happens. That has to deal directly with Antiochus Epiphanes, but also what the Antichrist is going to do. So you're way ahead of me. I'm still. Yeah. I know that's a first. Mr. Landis, Mr. Adams is way ahead of me. Maybe we're in trouble. So that's kind of where we're at in history. The Seleucids are at this point ruling the land of Israel. And so with that as our general overview, we're talking hundreds of years in history here. So it's very, very broad strokes to kind of get us to where we need to be. Antiochus Epiphanes, he was Antiochus the Fourth. So his father was Antiochus the Third. This is going to get confusing fast, so I'm trying to make this very easy. Antiochus the Third, he was influenced very greatly by a man that we also know from history, Hannibal. Who recognizes the name Hannibal? What was he king of? It was Carthage, yes. He was the king of Carthage. And after the Battle of Carthage, Hannibal was defeated, and he fled to a city called Antioch, which was ruled by the Seleucid Empire, or Antiochus III. All right? So he was there hiding out in Antioch for the Romans, and he convinced Antiochus III to go to war with the Romans. I guess he was just angry that they had destroyed his city. So they go to war with them, and in the year 198, things went very bad for the Seleucids, for Antiochus III. He lost a major battle, ended up having to retreat. But part of the terms of his loss was that he had to now pay tribute to Rome to keep Rome from attacking him. So in order to make sure that tribute actually came to Rome, Rome took 20 prisoners with them. One of them was his son, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, as he would later come to call himself. So he was held hostage in Rome. This man, Antiochus, was held hostage in Rome for several years. He was a young man when he went, and he was ready to rule when his father died. He was actually on his way back from Rome. His brother was ruling, and his brother was assassinated. So this opened up the throne for him to take the throne. A lot of people are like, oh, there's no way there was a connection. There was probably a connection. If you know Antiochus, there was definitely a connection between his brother's assassination and his magic return to his empire. So in Rome, Antiochus learned a few things. He learned discipline, but he also learned a lot about tyranny, being a strong tyrannical leader, and he really, really admired Rome's power and their determination that you see just throughout the Roman Empire. So on his when he comes back, he comes through Jerusalem. Now, it's important to note that Jerusalem, while it plays a major part in the Bible, in the grand scheme of things, Jerusalem was the way to get to places. So it was more or less a stopping point on the roads. So you have Egypt to the south. For you, it would be here. And they would come up through Jerusalem to go to I'm getting all sorts of confused. I'm doing this backwards. But they would come up to go up through Jerusalem to go to Asia Minor, to go to Europe, to go west. No, to go east, sorry. To go east into Asia. So Jerusalem, you can look at it as like a bus stop. It wasn't that important in the grand scheme of things, but of course to us it is. To world politics it wasn't, but we understand that God used these events in the lives of his people. And of course it'll come into play in future prophecy as well, and in these events as well. All right, so he was crowned king after returning home when his brother was assassinated. Just happened to die, oops. And upon becoming king, he took this title, Epiphanes. What does the word Epiphanes mean? There's some debate. Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah, some people. So from the same source, they give two meanings, and every source that I've read, it's one or the other, but most sources give it as both. One is an illumination, and the other one is God manifest. So, and like I said, both sources give the same thing. It's like this one and this one. If you know this man's character, God manifest does not isn't surprising. Let's put it that way. He saw himself as God and proclaimed himself as such. He saw himself as the son of Zeus. So he was proclaiming himself as deity. So anyway, he took this name Epiphanes because he was, in his mind, the enlightened one. He was God manifest to his people, and he was just the greatest thing in the world in his mind. But the truth shows differently. This was his new title. Let's talk a little bit about how he corrupted the office of the high priest, because it was around his time that we see the high priest office start to become open for bribery, basically. There was a man named Onias, and he was the high priest at the time when Antiochus III was reigning, his father. So Onias, he was a decent high priest. He kept to the Jewish traditions, kept to the law, made sure that they followed the law. And but when Antiochus IV became king, his brother, Onias' brother, Jason, saw an opportunity for power. So he goes to Antiochus and he bribes him. He pays him 440 talents of silver so that he can become the high priest. So Antiochus removes Onias and puts Jason in. Now, we have to understand, Jason was not a good man. He did not have good intentions. In fact, after he became high priest, he built a Greek gymnasium in Jerusalem at the base, many believe at the base of the temple. And it was built dedicated to the Greek god Hermes. So he was not a good Jewish believer. Let's put it that way. He was all about, he loved the Greeks. There's a word that will come up into play. It's called Hellenization. And it's basically the Greeks' term for transforming a culture from whatever their culture was to Greek. So the Jewish culture, they were trying to transform it from Jewish to Greek. And that's called Hellenization. And so he was all for this process. Jason was all about Hellenization. So Jason, he bought the office. 3 years later, another man, excuse me, another man, his name is Menelaus, he also bribed Antiochus IV. And he bribed him more than Jason did. So he was now given the office of the high priest. So this position that was supposed to be only for the Levites is now up for the highest bidder, basically. And so Antiochus gives it to him. In the year 169, Antiochus goes off to war down in Egypt. And rumors come up to Jerusalem that Antiochus died in battle. So Jason, still alive, decided, great, now I'm going to become the high priest again. He goes up and he takes it by force. And then Antiochus hears about this, and he comes up and proves that he's still alive by pillaging the city of Jerusalem. This is how he showed that he was still alive. This was the first time he comes to Jerusalem to pillage Jerusalem. He comes another time. This time he merely took gold out of the temple and pillaged and killed several thousand people. I say only because it gets worse. So let's talk very quickly about his military excursions. He liked to invade Egypt. He wanted to have Egypt. His eye was on Alexandria. He wanted to conquer and own Alexandria. His first invasion in 169 went well, but because of rumors of his death, he left that invasion and then would come back 2 years later in the year 167 BC. This time he successfully sacked Memphis, a city in Egypt. But he was on his way to Alexandria. He was on the beach. He had his navy there. And he met with a Roman ambassador whose name was Gaius Popilius Leonis. And I like this guy because he humiliated Antiochus so much. It is hilarious. He tells Antiochus, you have to turn back now. Rome does not want you to attack Alexandria. And so he says, well, let me talk about this with my generals. And Antiochus takes a sword, draws a circle, Popilius, the Roman ambassador, takes a sword, draws a circle around Antiochus, says, if you leave the circle, you've declared war on Rome. And being a fairly intelligent man, he realized that wasn't going to work. So, but he was infuriated because he had been humiliated by this ambassador, and he decided not to go to war with Rome, and he withdrew his troops. But on his way back to his capital, he stops in Jerusalem again. So remember, Jerusalem is just on the way to where he's going. Jerusalem is not his goal. He's just stopping there. And that's when these events happen. In the year 167 BC, he stops in Jerusalem, and most people. Okay, so this is where I disagree with a lot of the people who read this. They'll say that this is the abomination of desolation. I don't agree with that because Jesus talks about a future abomination of desolation in Matthew. But a lot of people call this event that. It is an event similar, but him being a type of the Antichrist, this isn't the abomination of desolation. He dealt poorly with the Jews. He hated them, tried to force them to take and accept Greek culture. He actually had allies who would help him enter into Jerusalem in the year 169, the first time he was there. He came under a banner of peace, and he entered and started to destroy the city. It's the second time around, you'd think the Jews would wise up, but they didn't. He came again with the banner of peace. They let him in, and this time it's even worse. During these events, he kills 80,000 Jews. 80,000. So we're not talking, he was angry, stopped and killed a couple of people. he killed 80,000 Jews upon entering the city in the year 167. He killed all these people. He pillaged the city. He ravaged the temple, and he constructed a citadel that overlooked the temple. Also, it's important to note that when we say ravage the temple, he erected an idol. He erected an altar to Zeus in the idol. In the temple. And he erected an altar to Zeus in the temple on the brazen altar. So the altar that was meant for worshiping God, he built an altar to Zeus on top of that and forced Jews to come and offer pig sacrifices on that altar. Well, we know the Jews, that's not going to fly. Many Jews were outraged, and many died because he made laws that if you did not sacrifice to Zeus, if you could only sacrifice to Zeus, you could not follow any of the Jewish traditions. So you couldn't have any Jewish sacrifices, no circumcision, no feasts, no observation of the Sabbath day. And what Antiochus did, he would tell his soldiers, wait till the Sabbath day. The Jews won't fight on the Sabbath. Go around and start killing Jews on the Sabbath day, they won't fight back. Because in their mind it was work to fight. This man was evil. He was evil. He also he went into the temple, or he had one of his generals go into the temple to offer a pig in there, and they took and they flung the broth all throughout the temple to desecrate it. These were very evil people. For those who disobeyed their laws, many were beaten, many were murdered. Mothers who would have their infants circumcised would have their children hung around their neck, their dead children hung around their neck, and then they would also be strangled to death. So the reason I bring this up is the Jews hate this man, and this is why. He was an evil man, and the Jews despise him. And the things that he did now are remembered in Hanukkah. December 15th is the day he walked into the temple and desecrated it. So that's why they celebrate. Also, there's Jewish tradition says that the menorah stayed lighted for 8 days, 7 days or something like that, and there was only 1 day's supply of oil. So they see it as a miraculous event. Josephus likes to exaggerate, so that's where they get, and the book of Maccabees is where they get a lot of this information from. But that's why they celebrate or memorialize Hanukkah. It's not really a celebration. In America, it's more of a celebration, but it's more of a memorial for them. So, real quickly here, I want to get into the biblical aspects of it, but real quickly, we have to remember the Jews didn't let this go on. It didn't just happen and thousands of people getting killed all the time. He tried to go around to several villages and force other villages into the same process. So there was a man, his name was Mattathias. He was one of the people that they tried to force to offer a sacrifice on an altar to Zeus. He refused, and saying that I obey God's law. Well, another Jew steps up to offer the sacrifice for him, and Mattathias, in his anger, killed that Jew. And then the Greek general began to fight back. He killed the Greek general, and him and his sons began a revolt. We would call it the Maccabean Revolt. And so this lasted for 3 years and culminated with the Jews taking back the city of Jerusalem. And when they got to the temple, they found it had been left to decay. So they weren't even using it. what a slap in the face. These guys made the Jews really mad. And so they come and they restore that. The celebration of Hanukkah is the restoration of the temple. So Antiochus, he died from, many believe, from madness and grief because of the things that he did. In fact, many believe that the Jews actually began to call him the madman. Let me just read this. Shh. I've got something to read here. When hearing of the loss of Jerusalem, Antiochus was overcome with grief. He gave an impassioned speech, most of which was filled with sorrow for how poorly he treated the people of Jerusalem. He continued in this grief till the day he died, believed by many to have died a madman. The Jews had actually taken to calling him a madman, and in the end it was true. He amassed wealth and squandered it. His empire crumbled from beneath him, and the torments of his own mind drove him to madness. So this is the... Yes, sir? He was Syrian, but he ruled the Seleucid Empire, which was broken off. One of the 4 horns we read about in Daniel is broken off from the Greek Empire. It's the same one we read about with Paul. Right. Yeah. That's where he retreated to quite often. I didn't delve deep enough to, I had 2 days. I didn't delve deep enough to find out if that was their capital or not, but that's where they went to quite often. So that's how he died. I buried my notes in my other paper. All right. I want to get into the lasting effects and what it has to do with us, because all of this deals mostly with the Jews, but it does affect us. The Jews, The Jews still memorialize these events celebrating Hanukkah. This explains also, these events also explain a lot of the divisions that you see among the Jews during the time of Christ. You see, there were a lot of Jews, despite all the horrible things, that still wanted Hellenization. They still wanted that Greek Empire, that Greek culture. And the Roman culture, they were accepting that as well. But there were still a lot of Jews at the time of Christ who were still bitter and angry about these events, understandably so, and they wanted nothing to do with it. So you see a lot of division. You see even mistrust of the high priest office. Even though the Maccabees set it back in order, there was still a sense of hierarchy that went along with that should not have been biblically. So there's a lot of tension in Jerusalem at the time of Christ over all of these things. And it kind of plays out when you see Paul. Remember Paul, he was captured, and he wanted, I think they were going to stone him or something, and he said, "I believe in the resurrection." And all of a sudden you see the Sadducees arguing with the Pharisees, and they forget about Paul. And that's kind of why, because you have so many different people believing so many different things. It reminds us of when Jesus talked about how they were as sheep having no shepherd. Everyone did that which was right in his own eyes. Well, I believe this group better, so I'm going to follow that group. I believe the scribes because of this, and so I'm going to follow them. I believe the Pharisees. I believe the Sadducees. And Israel, as a nation, was very divided based on what they believed. Daniel chapter 8 is referring to, obviously, these events. The little horn is Antiochus. He comes, and even how it says he waxed exceeding great toward the south, heading into Egypt, and towards the east, and toward the pleasant land. So he expanded his empires in those directions. But, however, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. These are talking about the events of the temple, where he cast down the offerings in the temple. And the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, it was cast down, and the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Sorry, I'm struggling. I have, just so you know, I've got sores all over inside my mouth right now. So, but it's fine. I just, some of my words hurt to say. So, bear with me. I'm almost done. So, Antiochus, many people call this the abomination of desolation. I disagree. Matthew chapter 24. Let's turn over there. Matthew chapter 24. Here we see Jesus is talking in a future tense about a future event. Matthew chapter 24, verse 15 is where he mentions it, but let me see if that's, I don't think that's where we want to start. I'm in Matthew 25. That explains why I can't find it. Let's see. Let's read in verse... Let's start reading verse 12. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. So there you see, shall be, he's talking about a future event. So for people to say that that was the abomination, not so. It was a type. He was a type of Antichrist of events that would happen that we read about in Revelation. The Antichrist will come. He'll set himself up as God, Epiphanes, if you will, and he will rule for... Yes, sir?
Now, does this tie into the question that I asked?
What was...
The
The truth will be fallen? Is that... You asked about how the truth will be fallen. Yes, because he's going to cast down the truth. The Antichrist, when he comes, he's going to set himself up as God. And he's going to cast down the truth. He's going to set himself up in Jerusalem. And he's going to cast down the truth in that I'm God, you must worship me. So, yes. And Antiochus, the reason we talk about him is because he is a type. It's almost a picture of the things that will come. So, it's a double prophecy where it's talking about one event. It's talking about two events, but both events match up. And it's showing this event happened, but also there's a future event that's going to happen as well. And they're both very similar. Matthew 24, verse 6, though, is something I want us to think about for a minute, because it's the key for us. It's the key for us now. Matthew 24, verse 6, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. That's the key for us. When we look at future prophecy, sometimes the temptation is, oh no, all these things, I'm terrified. Ye shall not be troubled. Are we going to even be here? No. No, the Lord will come and take his own away before the events of the Antichrist. So we're not going to, we are pre-tribulation. We're pre-trib. So the Lord says that he's going to come and take us before those events come. So we have nothing to fear. Ye shall not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. All these things must come to pass, but we have nothing to fear. We shall not be troubled. A lot of people, because they have an incorrect view of when the tribulation starts, they're fearful of these events. They're fearful of the tribulation and of all the vials and the trumpets and all those things, because they think as Christians we have to go through those things. That is not so. The Bible is very clear. 1 Thessalonians 5. I actually didn't think we would have time to get to this, so I didn't put it in my notes. 1 Thessalonians 5:13. But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not, even as others sorrow. Even as others which have no hope. For if we believe Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds. So shall we to meet the Lord in the air. So shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. But of the times and seasons, chapter 5, but of the times and seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. We don't know when the Lord's going to return. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them upon them. Upon them. Doesn't say you, upon them. Every word of God is pure. We talked about that on the bus this morning. God put that word there on purpose. Upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are not in darkness. So the events of the tribulation aren't going to overtake us. It's going to overtake them. All right? So, what does that mean for us? Yay, no tribulation for us. But also, oh no, my neighbors. Oh no, my family, my friends, my coworkers. It's at first a relief, but then it grows into a burden, because we don't want to be the Christians that say, I'm good, I'm safe, it's fine. No. God puts us in here not for us to just feel safe, although that is part of it, but also to give us the burden that these people, should the Lord return today, will have to go through those events. So, Antiochus Epiphanes, he's a person in character, a person in history. I don't know why character came out. He's a person in history who we look at. He's an evil man. The Jews despise him. He was an evil man. But he kind of fits in there right between the Greek and the Roman rule of Jerusalem. This is the part I'm afraid of. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So the revolt.
The revolt, Maccabean revolt.
Yes, is that the beginning of Hanukkah then, or?
I don't know. I think they actually started celebrating Hanukkah when they took back the temple, and I think because it's a celebration of the return to the temple. I think I watched and read quite a bit, and everybody differs. You have to listen to Orthodox Greeks, because if you listen to Americanized Greeks, Orthodox Jews, if you listen to Americanized Jews, they're going to tell you, oh, it's about giving out presents and lighting candles, and it sounds like Christmas. I'm like, but it's nothing near. An Orthodox Greek Jew will tell you it's more of a memorial for those events, if I understand it properly. Yes, sir.
I never realized that all that happened less than 200 years
Yes.
At what point did, because then the Greeks, this would have been the Greeks going against the Jews, and then the Jews took back. How soon then did they lose to the Romans? Do you know what?
I don't know when. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't go that far forward. If I had my college notes, I could probably answer you, but I didn't print those out. Yeah, it was 167 when these events happened. I want to say the Romans had control mid 100th century, or around that time. It was very close to when the Romans took control. Sorry? Right. Yeah. All these events are fairly close to the birth of Christ. Yes, sir.
The Romans were in control when Christ was crucified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Jews went nuts again after the. Oh boy, this is a totally different period of time history. I did not look into this, so don't quote me on any of this. I believe an emperor named Titus comes and destroys the temple and Jerusalem in the year 76 AD. And so that whole war, there's a whole war around that, where the Zealots run up to Masada. And that's where we read about the Romans building what would it be called? A roadway, basically, a ramp to get up to the fortress that normally would be fairly impregnable. But the Romans built this ramp up to Masada so that they could attack it. The Jews, rather than suffering defeat, committed suicide with only a couple of people remaining alive, one of them being Josephus. I believe he was involved in that. I can't say 100% for sure, but Josephus writes, he's a Jewish historian, and he was favorable to Rome. So, of course, Josephus, you have to be careful when reading him because he will exaggerate. According to him, when the Jews left Egypt back in Exodus, they left Egypt with like 5 million people. Like he loves to exaggerate the size of Israel, make Israel massive. Yes.
That doesn't sound that exaggerated, except
I-
for the fact that the Bible says that it was a mixed multitude.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's saying Jews only. So, the estimates I've heard roughly 2 million. And I haven't really studied those things out, but he likes to exaggerate everything. Like for the deaths that happened there that Antiochus caused when he entered into Jerusalem the second time, he says close to 1 million. And most other sources are like 80,000, like 80 to 100,000. So he likes to exaggerate a little bit. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
So then, like, the geography of Israel, is like the first half more like history, and then like the second half is more like the prophecy?
Yeah, a lot of it is historical things that happen. A lot of what we talked about were historical. But they're all, so the prophecy in Daniel talks of these events, Antiochus, but also of the Antichrist that will come and set himself up in Jerusalem in the end times. So a lot of it, yes.
Sorry, even if you were to continue to verse 17 of chapter 9,
For
the end of the verse, for it not being complete.
Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah.
The end of the verse says, so he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision.
Yeah.
That would be the finishing, the
Yeah.
closing of the vision. So part of it has come to pass, yet there is more to come.
Yeah. It talks about Yeah, it talks about the stars being cast down to the ground and stamped upon them. Those things haven't happened yet. That's referring to the time of the tribulation. So the parts that we know have happened are particularly talking about the goat and the horn and the ram and all that. Those things we know have happened because we see them play out in history. I don't remember stars falling to the ground. And yes, ma'am. To check my phone. Oh. Uh-oh. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. He's saying, don't listen to Tim. Oh, okay. I think this is an answer to your question, Mike. The rise of Rome is about 30 BC. So he has access to Google right now. He's cheating. Julius Caesar is 56 BC. He's going to continue here. Yes, sir.
One of the things that's really interesting is when you hear people, especially in this area, like other churches, they always use words about the kingdom, and they call themselves kingdom builders, which is weird because it's almost like they're seeing themselves set up the millennial reign of Christ and completely ignoring the fact that the tribulation is coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get
Well, and it's interesting, too, because a lot of my source for these things were Jewish encyclopedias, Jewish people. And a lot of the Jews referred to that as the abomination of desolation. And that's why when Jesus is talking about it, he clearly says it's something that's going to happen, and he referenced the book of Daniel talking about those future events. That's how we know it hasn't happened yet. But a lot of the Jews, because they don't believe Christ, don't follow that. So I believe we are out of time, so I better go before I get any more text messages. Sorry. No, most of them were giving me dates for clarification. So the rise of Rome was 30 BC. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, was started around that same time. So. All right, we'll pray and then we are dismissed. Dear Lord, I thank you for the day you've given to us. I pray that you would just bless now. Lord, we thank you that we can read your word, we can see events in history play out, but Lord, then we remember that future events that you prophesy will also come to pass. And Lord, while that's a relief for us personally, it adds the burden that we need to be busy about your work, trying to see people saved, trying to win the lost. Lord, I pray that you would just bless now as we come into the service. Be with Pastor, Lord. Help his strength, help his voice, help him to be able to preach your word. Just give him the strength he needs. In your name, amen.